In today's episode, we explore AI and energy, how they shape our today, not just our future, and how we can use these to our advantage. We hope you enjoy. The next episode, I think every single South African thinks they are the masters as this particular topic because of load shedding. We have Josh Dippenaar, who is engineer at Sustainable Energy Africa. Hi, man.
Good, thank you. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Hey, from Gqeberha. You see, Xhosa speaker. I wish most South Africans could actually speak Xhosa. It's a beautiful language, very difficult, but good, beautiful language. Let's talk about sustainable energy. Like, where do we go? Let's start from where we are in South Africa. We're in trouble, are we not?
Can confirm we're in trouble.
How much trouble are we in? Because I don't think people realize how much cack we are in.
No, we're deep in terms of electricity. We are deep in trouble.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's break it down. Why do they load shed us? Like, simplify it, because I don't think a lot of South Africans, because South Africans get big words, these words that we just use and throw around, without actually understanding the extent of what's happening.
I mean, to cut it short, in a nutshell, it's because there's a shortage of power generation. So they've got a load shed to balance the system because there's not enough electricity on the grid.
And if they don't load shed?
Well, I mean, then you risk, I don't even want to say it, but because it's been thrown around in the media lately, but if you don't load shed, then you risk total grid collapse. But that's very unlikely, and I don't even want to speak about it because the people who run the load shedding are very sophisticated. But that's why they do load shedding, to keep the system in balance.
So actually what they're doing is good for
the system, yeah.
For the system that we're at.
But we should have more generation, so we shouldn't be in this situation.
Okay. And that's because of incompetence.
Yeah, incompetence, poor planning, and not building enough power stations.
You're so PC and you're so friendly. Like, you're so friendly. You actually sound the way I should sound because I don't get load shedding in my apartment. That's how I should sound. I feel like I'm angrier than you are about load shedding, and I don't get load shedding.
Yeah, we'll talk about the solutions and why I'm hopeful.
Okay, let's go this. How do you help municipalities with more efficient power solutions? That's the kind of work you are.
That's the work we do, yeah. So we're a not-for-profit supporting municipalities, and we essentially, the energy transition is this sort of global move towards renewable energy. And what it means is that electricity generation is moving from these large centralized power plants towards much more distributed generation. So there's solar panels on basically every single Checkers, Spar, ShopRite, Pick n Pay, Woolworths in South Africa. If you can see the roof, they are full with panels, which is great. So the transition is generations moving into our cities and towns, which is really exciting. And that means that municipalities, who are the cities and towns, have much more of a role to play in the electricity generation going forward. So we're working with municipalities to help them develop their skills and to allow people to put solar panels on their roof, feed excess electricity into the grid, and really have communities play much more of a role in the energy space.
So what happens when all of this is, when they're fixed, when Eskom is being fixed? What happens when most people are going to be on solar and most people are going to be off the grid? What happens to Eskom and them? Who pays them? That's what confuses me. What happens when the problem is fixed?
It's an interesting question. People often romanticize off-grid.
Yes, because let's talk about this, because I hear you're not a big fan of this off-grid thing.
I went to this eco cabin this weekend and it was off-grid and it was lovely. Like, actually, it wasn't off-grid, more than likely, because in winter and at night, that building still needs electricity from the grid. And so I think the idea of off-grid isn't truly off-grid. Having solar panels on your roof doesn't mean you're off-grid. You're still using the grid at night. And so, the way we use the grid changes dramatically, but you're still feeding excess into the grid. You're drawing from the grid at night. So the way that we charge and pay for the grid just changes. Okay. Yeah.
Is solar sustainable?
I think
it's been raining now for the last week, and it's going to be raining for another week.
Yeah.
What would the solar people do if they didn't have a bit of the grid coming through?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the whole point, is that the grid has a role to play, even when people have solar on their roofs. So batteries can help, but still there's so much value in having a sort of connected society. And so don't want to get philosophical about it, but the grid connects every single house, from a house in Cape Town to a house in Soweto. There's a wire running between them, and that whole allowing the grid to pass electricity when it's winter in Cape Town, we draw from Joburg. When they're having a bad time, you pass electricity around. So it allows for passing electricity around, which I think it's almost like you can see it as the veins of society, in some ways, yeah. But yeah, solar is sustainable. It's of course all materials have impacts, but I think it's of the most sustainable that we can manage.
All right. So if you're a small businesses are closing left, right, and center. COVID hit them. That was difficult.
Yeah.
Then the curfews, and now this.
Yeah.
If you were speaking to a person with a small business, what did you say? Like, what is the most affordable way to keep on pushing and to keep battling in this difficult place that it is to be a small business?
Yeah. Most small businesses have batteries by now. I think that's the first step towards protecting yourself from load shedding, is batteries or a diesel generator. Okay. Obviously, diesel generators are expensive. If you're using electricity in the daytime, so if you've got air conditioning, lights, refrigeration, then solar generates electricity during the daytime and can help your daytime electricity load. So get solar panels. Yeah. And there's a really nice sort of trend in South African municipalities is that you can feed electricity back into the grid and get paid for it.
How does this work?
Friends, people will tell you, in Germany you can feed solar into the grid in the daytime and the government pays you for it. Or in the UK, I'm like, did you know in 40 South African towns and cities you can do the same thing? You can feed electricity into the grid and they'll pay you for it. So that's really exciting. And so if you go away for a weekend or your business is closed on a Saturday and Sunday, you push that excess into the grid and they pay you for it, or they reduce your bill. So that's really, really exciting. And it's a move towards like democratizing of energy, or putting the power in people's hands where they can generate additional revenue.
How can you modernize the electricity pricing? How can you modernize that?
Yeah, so that's exactly the main thing, is to pay people for feeding into the grid, as opposed to in the past, you just get a bill at the end of the month. You don't really know how it was calculated. It's, like utilities and government because they have monopoly, you can't choose where you get electricity. You're just sort of at their mercy. But things are moving towards like app-based, getting paid for feeding into the grid, and much more sort of customer-centric points, all these kind of things.
If you were Minister of Electricity, what are a few things you would do or change? If you're a Minister of Electricity, you are the guy.
Yeah, that's big. I would support businesses to invest in energy and allow them to buy their own power, which is happening. So I think the minister and the government at large has been doing the right thing. There's a pipeline of power projects coming online that's like eye-wateringly large. Like the investment in generation is huge. So I think it's a really exciting, almost like pendulum shift. It feels like the pendulum's at its widest point now, like the worst, and it will swing. And hopefully there's a lot of jobs created and economic growth that comes from this like solar boom. They're calling it the solar gold rush at the moment.
And how long do you think it's going to take for South Africa to get better or best?
It takes 2 years to build a power plant, a large power plant.
But didn't they have money? Were they building power plants earlier?
Yeah, I'm telling you the same thing. Yeah. So hopefully in the next 2 years we see like a big change in load shedding. Worst case 3 years, I think. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's go back to what your company does. The basics of what you do day to day?
We travel around South Africa town by town, developing policies and application processes to connect solar to the grid and get paid for it, and helping them process large applications. So there's a big mall in Kwadukuza, north of Durban, and they're struggling to what's the impact on the grid of all the solar, and we help them go through the process and make sure that the grid can handle it and the municipality is comfortable with it, and they connect, and then go to the next town, do the same thing.
Is there no? It's because I'm seeing a lot of solar panels come out and start being put everywhere, and people are going to start understanding the monetary value of them. How do you keep them safe? Because I'm seeing many in townships until someone clicks, this is 8,000 rand.
Ish. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm starting to worry about that.
no, me too.
I know how my society works. You're a lot more positive than I am. I'm very positive, but I know how my society, because I grew up in a township. I know how it happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. I think what is positive, and what we need to do, is that everyone sort of buys in and sees the value of it. Like the same with power lines. Like people do steal the copper, but if you realize that you steal the copper and then there's no more electricity at my house, and like this is a shared asset and it's ours, hopefully we can sort of get that mind shift. But yeah, I don't know about panel theft. There's a very sort of romantic idea, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
I've got a feeling I'll be honest. I've got a feeling I won't hold back.
Where people are writing, the dream is to have solar panels on every house, every shack in South Africa. And yeah, I mean, what do you think of that? I mean, you've made clear, I think theft and practicalities make it difficult.
I think you'll be able to get more DSTV dishes than panels on people's... Yeah.
Well, the DSTV dishes are everywhere.
Yes, they are. Because they don't mind. They'd rather go, I'll be able to watch Super Sport, but I'll have a candle to keep the shack alight. I'm sorry. I grew up in Gugulethu, buddy.
No, I'm with you. I mean, so I feel the same way. I think that, I mean, it's great where it can make sense, maybe on some more semi-formalized RDP houses, but there is an exciting opportunity of like community energy projects, maybe sort of on the outskirts of a low-income community, fenced off.
Okay.
Everyone's together on
Agreed.
it. And then it supplies them.
So one of those, so now if I go to where I grew up, if you have a community-based project that has a central point, you touch that, you're dead.
Like a school.
Yeah. Like a school used to be, or a hospital. Now currently people are busy attacking schools. I don't know. That's a new thing. But that becomes the central point of the community, and they'll protect it with their lives. That makes more sense in the community that I was brought up in. But to give each person a solar panel, I can't see that working.
It's too much.
It's too much. It will have to be a central point that becomes like, because my mom says during the struggle, when they like the riots and stuff, it used to be like an unsaid thing. You don't touch schools, you don't touch teachers, you don't touch clinics and hospitals, right? Currently now we've lost that narrative. But what you're saying, a central point, is definitely the answer. It's definitely the answer.
Wouldn't that be a fantastic story if there's, solar panels on the school?
Yes.
Or in a sort of community hall, and it's like the sort of community values it and co-protects it.
No, agreed. And that would happen because currently, and a lot of people don't realize it's happening in townships. A lot of, for example, the police are letting a lot of the communities down. They've created centralized police force. Like illegal, obviously, but trying to protect the communities and the walk around. They're on WhatsApp. So these townships are more. There's a township economy happening. A lot of people don't talk about, and there is their own little livelihood that they have to do. They have to protect this thing, and they definitely will. But for me, I'm quite interested. Next year's the elections, and we know the government's going to do some magic to calm things down. Is that burning diesel? Is that what are they going to be doing for that entire time before the elections that they couldn't do now?
There's a very strong link between electricity systems and political systems. Like electricity revenue is massive for the country, and obviously it impacts everyone. Every voter is paying power. So politicians are going to do what they can to keep electricity prices down. They're going to do what they can to keep load shedding levels as low as possible. And if that means running power stations like in the red, into like unhealthy limits, I think it will be done because, votes count. So there is this unfortunate impact of politics on like technical things that shouldn't be impacted by politics, but I think that's a worldwide phenomenon, and it's nothing different in South Africa. So I wonder, maybe we'll have 10 months of low load shedding. We'll enjoy it, but we might pay the price next year.
Definitely. Okay, the difficulties of the business that you run. What's the difficulties? How receptive are the communities? What kind of things? What kind of pushback are you getting?
There's a lot of pushback from municipalities, government in general, around energy transition, which I described. So there's this whole move towards renewable energy.
People love talking about transition these days. Everyone's transitioning.
Just transition, yeah, exactly. Well,
terrible joke.
Oh, you want a different transition?
It's a joke. It's a joke.
So there are vested interests in the current system, no doubt. Coal miners, coal transport, truck drivers, the whole unregulated saga blew the lid on that. So, I mean, there's clear that people don't want change. They vest, even though the current situation has its impacts, they don't want change, at least those with vested interests. So we do come up against a lot of resistance in towns where they are very largely based on the coal economy. So I think the narrative just needs to be that like renewable energy is also job creating, can also be valuable to those communities. It's not necessarily the bad guy.
Okay, so we know that the fundamentals of the history of South Africa was built on coal mining and men leaving to go to the coal. So a lot of people, that's all they know. The grandfather, the father, all that kind of thing. It's going to take a lot of relearning and unlearning to be able to change that whole thing. Do you have people on the ground who are actually educating people in people's mother tongue? One, because this thing about teaching people English in townships is ridiculously close-minded. Are there people speaking the language, trying to educate people about this? If we take this job away from you, we'll give you this job.
There are community champions doing that. We're trying to find them and support them and build materials for them and videos and things in local languages. So I think more needs to be done, but it's just getting started. So hopefully we can build generations of solar panel installers.
My dad built a solar panel.
Yes, he was on that roof.
2023 on the roof. All right. So for me, one thing I do like that you speak, you have a positivity, and I can hear that you love South Africa, and there's an optimism that is there. You've spoken about how much guk we're in and how much trouble we're in. Do you think the government will let us fix this problem, or do they want to control us in some shape, form, or means?
The problem is being fixed. Like it's they've already let it go. President Ramaphosa lifted the lid on private investment power last year, June or July, when he lifted the licensing threshold, which means anyone can build any size power plant. And so since then, there's been billions of rand built in power plants. So the problem is being fixed as we speak. Like shovels are in the ground in the Northern Cape, they're building. So I don't know that the president and ministers knew how big an impact it would have, that lifting that license threshold, but the private sector has come to town and there's a lot going on. So I'm really excited. But I feel, we'll probably hit another problem and government will interfere and something will go wrong. But
do you think Gwede will let the coal get knocked this much? Do you think he will not push back? He will not fight back? That there's a mafia out there, a coal mafia that is
scary.
Yeah, brother, they're making too much money on coal. Do you think they're gonna do this lying down, just be able to let solar take over compared to hundreds of years of coal, like this easily?
I don't think that the transition will be that fast. I think people feel like it's an overnight 2-year, 5-year thing. It's not. It's going to be like a 10, 20-year thing. So I think coal plants will come to the end of their lives. I think Gwede will die fighting, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely will die fighting.
But hopefully there's still, room for Modupi and Kusile will be around for another 20, 30 years. And there'll be those coal jobs for a long time. So I don't think anyone's saying 2030 no more coal. That's ridiculous. So but I don't know. I think there will be winners and there will be losers. And it's really unfortunate for those towns that are built around coal mines because they're pretty sad places right now and they're also losing their jobs. And so I think something does need to be done for those communities.
Another thing for me is I know I have friends of mine and I'm involved in a company that has generators, has USB. They have all these things. I worry that electricity will be a rich person's thing.
Yeah.
And it's quite a sad state of affairs.
Very.
How can we make sure that we control the price because it's getting more and more expensive, but we have less of it?
So that's the big question. How do we ensure that low-income houses still have access to affordable electricity? And there's a lot of pushback from private sector and rich households especially when the municipality or the governments want to say, all right, great, you can have your own solar, but you still need to pay for your cross subsidies and you need to pay for your access to the grid. And that money that we get from them, they use to cross subsidize low-income households. So it's a story that's not really told in South Africa. It's something quite hush-hush in government. But every high-income household is overcharged for electricity in order to undercharge low-income households. So it's actually a lovely story that, you are contributing to 2 or 3 low-income households access to electricity. But because South Africa is quite sort of, what's the word, rich in intention about the past, like maybe a rich white guy wouldn't want to know that he's contributing to 3 households in Khayelitsha. So unfortunately, that story is quite under the table. So when people install solar, municipalities still need to get this money from these rich households in order to subsidize the poor, and they are doing it. They're changing the tariff structures, as you mentioned. The rich solar people obviously aren't happy about it, but there's no alternative. So it is. There are tensions in this transition that need to be managed.
Another question on that particular front is it the government being nice, or is that a political game to go? It's elections year next year. There'll always be election year, and going, no, don't worry, we're still giving you cheaper electricity than the rich man. Is that not a political move?
Maybe. But it's also, there are like affordability metrics. Like people can't afford power. It's a basic human need. And so giving, poorer people electricity at cheaper price, I think is a really good practice.
It definitely should be a no-brainer.
So, I mean, maybe it originated from votes, but I think it's still one of South Africa's greatest achievements is high access to electricity at relatively low prices.
Man, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. I've actually been able to see, I've learned a lot of things that I didn't know were even, in it, because we only think of Eskom, load shedding, you know what I mean? And that's, we're always complaining, but no one's talking about the nitty gritty of the details of it. And I think it's either people are either talking highbrow, intense information compared to you know all the high, but you're able to make it, for the everyday person like me.
Okay.
So it's been a pleasure, man.
Thanks, Siv. You're very in tune with electricity affairs in South Africa, so I appreciate your time.
No, I'm not. I'm in tune with South Africans. I
I
don't know much about electricity. I'm in tune with South Africans.
Thank you, my brother.
Sure, man. What a pleasure. Cheers, man. I will definitely look at the world in different eyes. Hope you guys enjoyed.